Loop 75. 75.1. Princess? Twilight asked, as Celestia opened the door. Ah, my faithful student. Celestia greeted her, stepping back. Come in, come in. I assume you have something to tell me. Yes, I did. Twilight walked slowly in, and waited while Celestia shut the door. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. For you, Twilight, my door is always open. Celestia started making some tea. Now, what is it you wanted to say? Well, I'd like to introduce myself. Twilight looked down, frowning, then back up. I promise it'll make sense. I'm just trying a novel way of approaching the subject. By all means, Celestia agreed. I must admit to being perplexed, but, by all means. Okay. Twilight shifted slightly. I am Trollight Sparkle. Daughter of Twilight Velvet and Night Light, sister of Shining Armor of the Royal Guard, and also sister to Spike. I am Princess Celestia's personal student. And glad I am to have you, Celestia replied. Twilight, however, held up a hoof. When she spoke next, her stance had changed. She was unmistakably sure of herself. I am Trollight Sparkle, element of magic and leader of the elements of harmony. I was involved in the defeat of Nightmare Moon, Discord, Chrysalis, and Sombra, along with many other foes and problems. Celestia blinked, shocked. There was a flash of purple light, and a golden tiara studded with amethysts appeared on Twilight's brow. Then Twilight flared as brightly as the jewelry had. When the light faded, she was nearly a foot taller, and had majestic wings. I am Princess Trollight Sparkle, Princess of Magic, she said quietly. Alicorn, sister of one alicorn, sister-in-law of two alicorns, and mother of one. Third in precedence in Equestria, after Celestia and Luna. With a faint whump, her magic turned from purple to deep orange, and the light coming through the window dimmed noticeably. I am Eternal Twilight, Lady of the Morning and the Evening, almost but not quite too dark to read by ruler of Equestria. And then, the aura, wings and crown vanished, and Twilight was standing there as her normal unicorn self. I am Trollight Sparkle, and I am in a time loop, she finished. Nice to meet you. 75.2. Twilight awoke, and looked around. It was the later end of her normal start position spread. By the looks of it, she was in the library, just before having Spike write the note to Celestia. Well, no reason to mess with the classics. Even if Spike had given her the nod they always shared when he was awake. Just as she inhaled, though, a voice spoke over her. Write this down, minion. I am no one's minion, unicorn whelp, a male voice slightly higher than Spike's tried to snarl. The high pitch was a serious impediment. Write it down anyway, continued the first voice. Twilight recognized it, and started to get a sinking feeling. Dear Princess Celestia, Trixie Lulamoon continued in the room next door, we have uncovered incontrovertible evidence that your sister, let's call her Moonbutt, will return shortly. Do you want her exploded, set on fire or cured? Twilight and Spike shared a confused glance. You might be tolerable, the other male voice admitted grudgingly. Sending. The anchor and her adoptive brother walked through the connecting doorway. Hi, Trixie, who's your Twilight began. Spike held out a paw, stopping her. Loop memories, Chui. Oh. Trollight Sparkle was one of Princess Celestia's two students, this loop. She and Trixie Lulamoon had each hatched a dragon egg at their entrance exams, twin eggs, in fact, and been taken in due to the sheer strength of their magical powers. Twilight had hatched the egg of Purple Spicorinu Velitar, known as Spike. And Trixie had hatched the egg of Red Smaugri Faenaro, known as Smaug. Well, this could be interesting, Twilight commented absently. Anyway. Hi, Trixie. Greetings, Twilight. Trixie replied, turning with a smile. Have you met my assistant? Both looping and not, yes, Twilight confirmed. Spike nodded agreement. Then frowned, as a loop memory stood out. Didn't you two burn down Canterlot Town Hall last year? That was just a fireworks display. Trixie protested. Sure, there were 3,000 fireworks, and Smaug lit them with his fire, but that's my excuse. Our excuse, Smaug interrupted. Did I not come up with it? Our excuse, thank you, and we're sticking to it. Twilight and Spike exchanged another look. We're doomed, Spike opined. But, on the plus side, it'll look pretty. From, orbit. 75.3, Navasordo Mundi. So, do you accept me as your new god now, foolish mare? Are you willing to bow to the inevitable? Hey! Stop that! Pinky giggled as she put a bit of grilled pineapple on one of the headband's gooey's arms, before turning to get some more fruit. But it's a perfect use for you, silly. I mean, I enjoy using you as a headband, but any time I wear you, ponies keep complaining about your sharp points. I know it's not your fault, but my friends don't react well to accidentally being impaled by medieval weapons. That does not mean you can use me as a skewer. Pinky turned back, with a few more pieces of fruit and hooves, grinning at the stationary god of the round. But I don't want you just collecting dust and trying to get me to switch religions. I mean, you're my friend, and I want to share you with every pony. And what other way to do that then? Wait. You consider me a friend? Of course, silly. I know you'd rather want a follower, but I think I know what you need, and that's someone you can share some good times with. Someone you can talk to and laugh and have fun with. And who better than me? The god of the round stopped for a second, weighing thoughts in its head. Then. Very well. I accept your friendship. Pinky grinned as she tingled all over as she started trying to figure out how to have a party for a headband. But really, skewing fruit on me. If the headband could make a face, it would have been pouting a bit right now. Just say they are your blessings to the masses, Pinky shrugged, as she impaled a grilled mango onto one of the gooey's arms. That could work. 75.2 continued. Right, Twilight said briskly one morning. As I'm sure you know, Trixie, having been through this all so many times. Trixie Lulamoon, official-unofficial Ponyville performance artist, made an expansive gesture. Of course I know. Trollight Sparkle, official librarian, nodded towards the red dragon slouched over one of the armchairs. But Smaug doesn't. So I need to tell him. Then tell him, Twilight, Trixie said carelessly. Why are you bothering me? Twilight counted to 3. Backwards. From 1,000. As I was saying. Smaug, a dragon moves into the local mountain about now, and we have to evict him one way or another. I'm just extending you the invitation in case you want to get involved. Smaug looked up, closing a book which Twilight noticed was one of her copies of the Silmarillion. I accept. I have had enough of this propaganda for one day. That's unsettling, Twilight mused. Okay. Hold on while I go get the others. Must we? The red dragon looked at her with dull eyes. Hey, remember what I told you, Spike pointed out. Friends are where strength comes from. Yes, but they aren't even awake. Smaug waved out the window. How can you maintain such a strong bond with them? Because they are our friends, Twilight answered. Smaug frowned, but said nothing further. You call this a horde? Smaug demanded, striding into the cave as fast as his short legs could carry him. I do, hatchling, the dragon lying astride the pile of gold and gems answered. He blinked, slowly. Leave now, before I give you the fate that awaits all thieves. You need not concern yourself with thievery, Smaug replied, kicking a golden plate out of his path. I would not steal trinkets. What did you just say? With a clattering of coins and a rustle of jewelry, the old dragon rose from his posture of repose. You, a mere stripling, come here and lecture me on what a hoard is. All there is in this cave is window dressing. Smaug picked up some coins and let them run through his claws. It looks pretty, and tastes good, but it has no real value. With a gesture, he made a gleaming sword appear in his left hand. It was about the right scale for his current size. This has value. It was awarded by Thorin Oakenshield, King of Dwarves, for destroying an army of our mutual foes and as payment for the great gem the Arkenstone. Smaug turned the blade, letting filtered daylight catch the runes engraved into it, including 4 straight-edged draconic runes, clearly a later addition. This is Orcrist Uralukina, and there are none like it. Okay, I'm kind of scared, Spike whispered. He actually listened to me. From what Trixie can tell, you made quite an impression. Trixie paused. With his body. In a mountain. There was a bright flash from inside the cave. Then a roar, rumbling up through their feet. Then a flare as bright as the sun. Ventuver the black smoke erupted through the side wall of his cave. Smaug followed, mouth blazing with white-hot dragon fire. Ah, Spike nodded. This I recognize. Aggressive negotiations. There was an ooh from the elements, gathered behind them. Another explosion, this time of red cord black smoke, earned an ah. I wonder if this Ventuver would be willing to participate in my shows, Trixie wondered aloud. I could go into air shows. After today, I suspect he'll demand a protection spell, Twilight said delicately. 75.4, Mr. K. The prisoner looked on as the reinforced door swooshed open, letting in someone he assumed was yet another unevolved gawker. So, are you going to stare at me all day? Perhaps throw some peanuts or tap the glass? He sneered. Nope. I just came by to ask why you were, in technical terms, such a meathead, said the young lady, her reddish curls bobbing as she smiled. She had on the same kind of outfit that was shared by most of the grunts in this place. Meathead? My reasons are my own. Why should I answer to you? Well, I suppose I can try to cheer you up. Although, I think some of my efforts sometimes have the opposite effect. Rarely. I've been trapped in a tiny prison, a prison that can be ejected towards the ground whenever your boss wants. I've been bored out of my skull, waiting for my inevitable execution, the lanky black-haired individual snorted. In other words, do your worst. The red-haired lady just smiled wider. Okie dokie, Loki. What the hell happened? Nick Fury demanded. One of his subordinates answered, apparently, one of our crew briefly spoke with the prisoner. Then she put on the 10-hour version of Nyan Cat on repeat and set the volume to change randomly at odd intervals. And no one noticed for how long? 12 days. She posted a notice on the door that stated the prisoner was not to be disturbed by anyone. She made it look like official orders, sir. Automatic food and water dispensers ensured that the prisoner didn't perish. And how is the prisoner doing? He's still alive. The subordinate looked over his report. The doctors say he's starting to use verbs again. Nick Fury thought for a moment. Who's the person who did this? Diane Pinkamena Pai. Find this Diane Pinkamena Pai. Give her a full psych check and a promotion. I would hold off on the psych eval. Nick Fury raised his eyebrow. I've read her file. She used to visit all of her old therapists at the asylum. I am guessing they were not there as doctors. No, sir. They were not. 75.2 continued. Why are we out here? Smaug grumbled, putting the box of dynamite down. Well, the mayor said that Trixie could not test her explosives in town anymore, unless she wanted to start paying for windows. Trixie shook her head, her face hangdog. I had nearly worked out how to make an explosive which would be soundless. I must admit that the concept is intriguing, Smaug said, frowning. How would that work? The sound would be ultrasonic and vent most of the sound-based energy directly upwards. Trixie opened the box with magic. Right, let's see, one of these was minimizing auditory signature in favor of light signature, and one was the other way around. I can't remember which. Fluttershy raised a hoof tentatively, and pulled her bright pink earmuffs off one ear. Why am I out here? Oh. Well, Trixie winced. Last time I tried testing these, I summoned an Ursa Minor. So I wanted to have you around to defuse things with the local wildlife. No pun intended, she added as Smaug chuckled. Fluttershy nodded timidly. If I can help, that's fine. She screwed up her eyes, pulled her earmuffs back over her ears, and sat down on the earth with her hooves holding them in place. Well, may as well use trial and error, Trixie decided. Whichever one of these makes a very loud bang, that is from the side of the box I put the loud ones in. She shot 2 small spells at the fuses, which began to hiss. Fire in the hole. When the concussion died away, Smaug got up. Trixie's idea of loud bang would have done credit to a small volcano, and he'd been knocked sprawling, and looked with appreciation at the blast scarring and the crater. There was something missing, though. 2 somethings. Where did you go? He asked, looking around. The Pegasus and the unicorn appeared to have vanished into thin air. The ground heaved up, and some kind of canine creature that looked like a cross between a warg and an orc dug his way into the air. Have you seen 2 ponies? Smaug asked, facing the newcomer. It appeared to ignore him, turning to face down the hole it had left. No more pony. Only dragon. When Smaug spoke next, his voice had a kind of silky quality. Did you take them? Of course, the dog-like tunneler said, matter-of-factly. Ponies pull mine carts. Right. Right. Smaug took a deep breath, and then exhaled a roaring wall of flame at the luckless rover. Before the diamond dog could even start trying to extinguish his rapidly burning fur, Smaug was at the hole and blasting it 10 feet wide with a lance-like beam of dragon fire. I really need to learn not to do things like that, Trixie said to nobody in particular. She was still flash-blinded from the explosion, she couldn't hear herself speaking, and while both problems could be solved by going alicorn, she didn't feel like explaining everything to Fluttershy. Besides, she could totally get them out of this once her eyesight returned. Then the ground shook. A wave of heat rolled over her. Trixie apologizes to her rescuer, she said, as distinctly as she could, but she is currently not only blind but also deaf. Which way is out? Moving air let her know someone was approaching, and then some claws tapped her shoulder lightly. Well, this will be fun, Trixie muttered. So, yeah, Trixie concluded, blinking rapidly. Smaug led Fluttershy and I out of the complex, I assume melting new doorways a few times, and then we got back here and you fixed my eyesight and hearing. No harm done. Fluttershy gave Smaug a quick glance. Thank you, Smaug. The red dragon shrugged. Actually, Twilight said, looking thoughtful. I have a couple of questions for Smaug. First, you didn't kill anyone, did you? Smaug examined his claws. They weren't worthy of that much attention. I see. Twilight nodded, still frowning. And the second question? Why, precisely, did you do it? Smaug stopped moving for a moment. He recovered quite quickly, and affected a relaxed attitude, but the equestrian loopers had all seen it. Well, I did want a fight, it's been a while, he said, shrugging. And I do owe Fluttershy of Everfree a debt for her help. Fluttershy frowned. It was no trouble, really. And she caught sight of the clock on the mantelpiece, and winced. Oh, no. Sorry, Twilight, I need to get back home soon. Angel's hurt his toe, and I need to change the poultice. It's okay, Twilight said, shrugging. Go ahead. As soon as she was out of the door, Twilight turned back to Smaug. You know, I don't believe you. Why not? Smaug asked, lip twitching as though it wanted to curl into a snarl. It has been a while. But you just said that the diamond dogs weren't worth your attention, Twilight replied. And it takes considerably more attention not to kill them, if you're actually fighting them. Precisely. I put no effort into making them dead or keeping them alive. Twilight dragged the argument back on track. But that means this wasn't even a fight, just a rescue. The red dragon looked mildly uncomfortable. So what if it was? Rescues are more challenging. And this isn't the looping Fluttershy you made just that point a few months ago. Smaug pressed his lips closed. Smaug, Spike spoke up for the first time. It's not an admission of weakness if you just wanted to help them. Or that you like someone. I don't. Smaug snapped. He trailed off. After examining him for a minute or so, Twilight looked away. If you don't want to admit it, fine. But we're not going to laugh at you if you did. 75.5. 1 measure of Earth Normal Gin, please. And some tonic. Mac considered his customer as he poured out the drink. Ain't all that often y'all are in here alone. Captain. Shining Armor shrugged wordlessly, letting his unlatched suit of armor fall off. His wings, revealed by the loss of the armor, twitched slightly. Ah. Prince, then. Mac slid the drink in front of him. Enjoy. The alicorn reached out with his magic and lifted the glass gently, then took a small bubble in an independent telekinetic field and drank it. Swirling it around once to enjoy the taste, he swallowed. Ah, that does help. Help with what, if you don't mind my skin, your highness? Mac requested. Well. Shining gestured to his wings, which half opened for a moment. I lost track of the loop, and got seen by Cadence, who isn't awake this time as an alicorn. And. He sighed. I don't know why it bothers me. But it brought home again how, in some ways, I do feel kind of alone. Mac blinked. Something up with y'all's marriage? I mean. No, nothing like that. Shining shook his head. We still love one another, that hasn't changed. But, well. In the loops. I'm the only prince. The only male alicorn. The Earth Pony, who was resolutely an Earth Pony, frowned. I ain't an alicorn, it's true. But what about Spike, and Discord? Neither of them are alicorns either. I know they're, well, they have been rulers, but it isn't the same. Shining frowned. This probably sounds like I'm complaining over nothing, but I do understand where y'all are coming from, yup. Mac topped up the glass. And I know it can get wearying. It's just, Shining shrugged. The elements, and the other loopers, are great, but, well. Sometimes, I just feel a need to be one of the guys. I can't do that when I don't really have much in common with the other guys. Go on, if you please, your highness, Mac said. Well, you keep referring to me by my title, Shining pointed out. Which doesn't really help. Mac winced. And Discord, well, it's just plain hard to relate to him. I think my sister and some of her friends do fairly well, but, not me. You've got to accept them as they are, Mac volunteered. But Discord is one o' the strange ones, yep. Spike is, easier. The prince shrugged, both his forelegs and his wings. We were friends, if not all that close, before the loops. Now, with both of us married and both of us Twilight's brothers, we're pretty similar. But, at the same time, Shining trailed off helplessly. It's just, not the same. And it shouldn't matter, but it does. Mac refilled his glass again. Well, I don't know if there's an easy answer for that one, he said after a moment. Might just be tiredness, might be whatever. But y'all have a point about ta way I talk to you. Shining. Shining gave him a tight smile. Thank you for making an effort. 75.2 continued. Come on, Smaug, Spike called. You were hatched on the same day as me this loop, this is your birthday as well. Smaug's head rose from the bed. Birthday? Why is this worthy of commemoration? It's kind of a celebration of the life of the person, as much as anything, Spike replied, frowning. Being glad that they're a friend, that they're a year older. It's their day. Spike paused. Just don't let it go to your head, because if dragons like we are now do that too much then you turn into a huge monster. And that never goes well. Smaug lay back down on the bed. I see no reason to get involved. You get presents, Spike reminded him. A long pause. Then Smaug let out a sigh, and got up. Oh, very well. Why is there such a tendency for mundanity? Smaug muttered, looking at the latest present. Trixie had given him a book about liquid rocket fuels. I am sure that I will eventually read it, but, they are not precious, not valuable, what worth do they have? They're useful, or just nice to have, Spike tried to explain. Presents are as important for what they mean as what they are. Not convinced, Smaug replied in a low voice. They looked up at the sound of nearby hooves. Fluttershy began. Spike, I'd like you to have this. She reached into her left saddlebag, and pulled out a wrapped package. Thanks. Spike said, smiling at her, and opened it efficiently with a claw. Oh, nice. He lifted the woolen sweater from the package. Thanks, Shy. Did you knit this yourself? Fluttershy nodded quickly. You're really good at it. Spike turned it around, found the base, and slipped it on. What do you think? It looks good, Fluttershy volunteered. But I'm sure that's you, not the sweater. Don't be too hard on yourself, Spike waved a hand. I mean, it is good. Just, don't overdo it either. This thick is fine for me, cause dragons don't overheat. Hey, maybe you could do these for everyone for hearths warming. Okay, Fluttershy nodded. Oh, I had something for Smaug as well. Another parcel came out of the other saddlebag, and Smaug shredded the paper open. Unlike Spike's one, it wasn't a sweater. In fact, it was a scarf. Smaug picked it up carefully, unfolded it, and looked at both sides. The pattern wasn't particularly novel, as such red scales picked out in gold, but the thing which was really surprising was the sheer length. Fluttershy, Spike said, uncertainly. That scarf has got to be at least 30 feet long. Oh, Fluttershy blushed. I didn't know how long to do it, so I asked Trixie, and she said the longer the better. Then she winked. The Pegasus pushed her hooves together, wincing. I'm sorry if it's too long. No. Smaug said, his voice absent the usual sharpness. This is fine. My thanks. Fluttershy smiled, though it still looked a bit nervous. That's okay. The red dragon wrapped the scarf around his neck several times, letting both ends trail down his back. I am sure I will grow into it. You do know our loop is only about 5 years? Spike asked, after Fluttershy had left. I do, Smaug confirmed. But, does that mean you're going to keep it? I mean, in your... Yes, Smaug replied, in a tone that brooked no further comment. Wisely, Spike shut up. 75.6. So, girls, Nyx asked, hovering a foot or so above the floor. I had this idea. Go on, Applebloom said, not a little warily. Right. Anyway, we should think up evil forms for you all. She smiled apologetically. Except for you, of course, Silver. Why don't I get an evil form? Silverfur asked, white-gray furred tail lashing. 'Cause you ain't an alicorn, I think, Apple Bloom pointed out. Besides, foxes are already kinda evil. More like tricksters, Diamond Tiara interjected. Remember, that nice Naruto fellow's got a fox motif. He's got a huge fox in his belly, more like, Silverfur corrected. Evil forms? Nyx asked again. Oh, right. Sure, sure. Apple Bloom frowned. Grinding gears. Apple Wither? Scudolo asked. Could work. I'll think about it. What about you, Scoots? I would be best as Black and Tiara, Diamond stated. And Scudolo should be Orange Baroness. Wrong note. Sweetie suggested. It's got a good sound to it, Scudolo agreed. No it doesn't, that's the point. Sweetie stuck her tongue out. Right, good. That was quick. What should our demands be? Apple Bloom reared up on her hind legs. With a double flash, cookie, and then her horn and wings appeared, and her mane transitioned to a complex nest of mechadendrites. I am Apple Wither, factory owner of darkness. The unpaid overtime shall last for as long as regular working hours. Scudolo kicked a handy cloud Pansy had just created, producing a roll of thunder. Thanks. Apple Bloom added brightly, nodding. That really added to the effect. Pleasure. Scudolo tugged her mane, then started giggling. You realize, of course, that under the rule of Black and Tiara it will be illegal to wear nice-looking jewelry, Diamond said, matching Apple Bloom's transformation. No subject is allowed to look nicer than their ruler. And wrong note will ban any conversation that is not in song. You may think you have had the last laugh, Scudolo countered, transforming just a hair behind Sweetie Belle. But the Orange Baroness army will conquer all below it. Silvertail padded over to Nyx. Is it me, or has this turned into a game of civilization? It pretty much has, yet. Mwah ha ha hey 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 hey. Black and Tiara laughed. No, too breathy, wrong note said critically. If you want it to carry, you need more power behind it. Nyx looked Silver up and down. Want to go wait on a cloud till they get it out of their system? Yeah, alright. Do you have a copy of that card game? 75.2 continued, Tricorn King. Spike. Yes Smaug, said the purple dragon. Why am I blindfolded? For that matter, why am I still blindfolded? Spike quickly removed the blindfold. Because of this, he shouted, spreading his arms out to indicate their current location. Smaug just looked around, taking in Spike and their friends Sense Fluttershy and their location. To his surprise, the ponies were all wearing camouflage outfits. Why are we in a ditch? Because of that. Trixie shouted, pointing up at the sky. As the others followed her lead, they watched in awe as the dragon migration passed by overhead. Spike was serving out tea and biscuits, wearing the pink frilly apron that he had from the baseline. He'd been expecting some kind of snarky comment from Smaug about it, but when he didn't hear anything, he turned to his in-loop brother. Smaug was just standing there, gazing in rapture at the flying dragons above them. There even seemed to be a shimmer of tears in his eyes. Sidling closer to him, Spike said in a whisper, reminds you of home, doesn't it? Yes, said Smaug in a faraway voice. After the War of Wrath, we dragons escaped to the north to live out our lives. Eventually we all separated and went our separate ways, but for a time. The little red dragon turned his head slightly to Spike. Tell me, what are the dragons here like? Spike grimaced a bit. In the baseline, he whispered back, I went after the migration to try and figure out who I was. I met a bunch of teenage dragons who at first gave me a hard time for living with ponies, then accepted me when I belly flopped onto lava. Nodding at Smaug's win-CE, Spike continued, they then tried to induct me into their ranks by getting me to smash a defenseless phoenix egg. Why? Did the parents attack them or the migration's hatchlings? Nope. They just wanted to smash it because they felt like it. A look of disgust passed over Smaug's face. Killing an unborn hatchling for laughs, vile. Seeing Spike's raised eyebrow, Smaug quickly added, there's no sport in killing the unborn. No glory to it. Whatever you say, Smaug, Spike said as he turned back to his other friends, a small smile on his face. 75.7 Dear Princess Celestia, I have recently discovered that the mare in the moon is to return shortly. Celestia perused the letter, thinking. Twilight was certainly bright enough to have discovered this, but was it coincidence that it had been so close to the date of Luna's return? She read on. As such, I have traveled to the moon. The alicorn of the sun started, and scanned back up the letter to make sure she hadn't missed anything. She hadn't. As such, I have traveled to the moon, blasted Nightmare Moon with a spell Cadence taught me, and have subsequently adopted both her good side and her evil side. The evil side can be controlled quite easily by cookies. I should be back shortly. Your faithful student, Twilight. Celestia let the letter fall from her magical grip. What? She's coming, Spike reported, eyes closed in the corner. Right, Nyx whispered, and stifled a giggle before putting on a sullen expression. Across from her, Luna, about the same size as her dark-side sister, beamed up at Twilight. Can I have some more ice cream, Chui? Certainly, Twilight replied, measuring out a large ice cream cone and passing it to the Philipede alicorn. Then she measured out a slightly smaller one and gave it to Nyx. No fair. Nyx said, huffing. Hers is larger. And impolite little alicorns don't get as much ice cream, do they, Nyx? Twilight asked. Nyx crossed her forelegs and pouted. Humph. Well, if you don't want any. The darker-colored filly looked at Twilight out of the corner of her eye. Didn't say that. Well, there you go, then. Twilight patiently held out the ice cream, until Nyx took it, humphed it again, and started licking it enthusiastically. Celestia stood in the doorway, jaw dropped. Oh, hello, Princess. Twilight said, turning towards her mentor. Don't worry, I think I can take care of them. Don't like you. Nyx said, pointing at Celestia. Not fair. But she's big, sis Celestia. Luna protested. She's lovely. Well, she melts ice cream. Nyx said with finality. Luna gasped. But two. Luna and Nightmare, how? Celestia managed. It's magic, I don't have to explain it. Twilight shrugged. Now, Luna, Nyx, say sorry to your sister for trying to take over the world. Sorry, sis. Luna said brightly. Nyx. Twilight pressed after a few seconds, a note of warning in her voice. Esri. Nyx muttered grudgingly, and went back to her ice cream. What do you think I should do? Twilight asked her two daughters. She'd managed to get the adoptions both made legal, at least partly because of one of Ivory's pre-prepared legal bamboozlement packs. Luna hovered up to neck height, wings buzzing frantically, and looked at the exposed chrysalis. She tried to ruin a wedding, but I think she's nice really. Nyx copied her, rising up on Twilight's other side. She hurt big sis Celestia. Get her. But we can't just do that. Luna protested. We have to be nice. Do I get to choose? Chrysalis asked. Nope, both fillies chorused. Behind Chrysalis, in the distance, there was a bright flash as Spike took a photo of the scene. When else were they going to get a picture of Twilight with a shoulder angel and a shoulder demon? 75.2 continued. These traps are stupid. Trixie shouted, firing an explosive spell at the door in front of them. My worst fear is not possible, that's stupid. It showed your worst fear when you tried to open it. Smaug asked, frowning at the large door. What did it show? I was alone, on stage, with everyone throwing tomatoes at me, and there was a poster on the back wall saying that explosives no longer functioned, Trixie said, still attacking the door. It's physically and chemically impossible. I mean, I'm good at performing. You realize that door hasn't changed in the whole time you've been blasting it, right? Smaug pointed out. So? Trixie shot back. It's going to give in one day. Oh, let me do it. The juvenile dragon shoved her none too gently out of the way, inhaled, and fired a blaze of white-blue fire with shimmering mock diamonds in the middle of the stream. The world lurched. Smaug lay on a great golden hoard. The wealth of an entire civilization at his feet, blazing in the sunlight filtering through holes high up in his lair. He was the last and greatest of the dragons of Arda. Most powerful creature in the world, unconquerable, rich beyond the dreams of lesser beings. Alone. Unutterably bored. Ultimately, worthless, because nothing he did from now to the end of days would change anything or be remembered. Fated to sit atop the wealth of ages, forever. Forever alone. Og. Smaug. Smaug's eyes opened. There was a hoof prodding his shoulder, and he was face down on the ground. Something was glowing brightly in front of him. What? Are you all right? A voice he recognized as Trixie asked, concerned. You blew the door up, which, by the way, was awesome. I have to ascend to make that happen and then collapsed. I see. Smaug formed a fist, and punched the ground. Then stood, a little shakily. What now? Trixie frowned. We go through here, there's some stupidly long stairway, and then Sombra shows up. Look, it'll probably be easier if I keep him occupied and you take the heart. You clearly had a bad reaction to whatever your worst fear was. I did not. Smaug bit off the end of the sentence, growled, and nodded. You're right. I did. And I hate that. Happens to all of us sometimes, Trixie said sympathetically. I had pretty serious issues with self-worth for a while. Right, we'd better hurry. As she spoke, her horn glowed. Fly. You could do this all along? Smaug asked, warning in his voice as they rocketed along. We try to give the authentic experience to anyone who's bored, Trixie replied airily. I hear Sparkle used the ceiling as a slide the first time. You're actually pretty lucky. Well, I'm stuck, Trixie said in a bored voice, kicking desultorily at the black crystal cage. Smaug. You'd better take the heart. I'll hold him off. Your acting needs work, Smaug informed her, picking up the crystal heart. I'm not exactly trying to win an award here, Trixie informed him primly. And, for my next performance, I will defeat an evil unicorn without moving. A shield sprang up around her. That means get going, Trixie added. Off you go. Smaug rolled his eyes, turned, and set off. A black shape of crystal and smoke headed directly towards the running dragon, turning into King Sombra as it did so. Let's see if this works, Smaug muttered to himself, then energy crackled around his claws and teeth. He opened his mouth, and the fire that issued forth this time was a lance of purple and white shot through with deep red. He'd learned how to do this a long time ago in Faerun. It was called Rebuking Breath. The main question was whether this Sombra counted as undead, or close enough, at any rate. After a moment, the flames died down, and he could see the fruits of his efforts. The dark unicorn was suspended in mid-air, conflicting energies roiling across his body. Smaug decided that probably meant close enough, and continued running. Since they'd been running fairly close to baseline, just having Twilight stay with the fake heart to protect it, and assigning Trixie and Smaug to the task of carrying the real heart, the celebration and stained glass window and all that followed were quite familiar to Twilight. She was impressed with the visitor, though. He'd really improved over his time in Equestria, especially compared to the first time he'd turned up and tried to incinerate the place. Now, however, the celebrations were done, and they were all back in Ponyville. Is that the last of the calamities your loop has for the unwary? Smaug asked, sitting heavily down in an armchair. Not quite, Twilight replied, shaking her head. One or two more of the same scale, but if you're all stressed out then Trixie and I can handle those. Ask me again near the time, the Dragon Dread decided. Will do. Twilight nodded, then brightened. Oh, I was going to tell you. We Trixie, Spike, and I, as well as Shining and Cadence wanted to let you have first pick of Sombra's treasury, because you were so instrumental in defeating him. I believe I will decline, he said eventually. Twilight blinked. Really? Really? Smaug confirmed. I believe I have memories enough. 75.8, Valentine Mikan. Twilight wondered what was going on as she noticed two stallions stood, one with a stopwatch, the other with a clipboard, stood waiting for something, after having been interrupted by the sound of a sonic rain boom. We're testing the myth of that Sonic the Hedgehog is the fastest thing alive, the one with the stopwatch stated, as he walked over to where his beret had fallen as a familiar blue hedgehog skidded into a furrow in the dirt, Rainbow Dash arriving a split second later. Plausible, the one with the clipboard stated, adjusting his glasses. Without ascension, the hedgehog is slightly faster, but we can't test post-ascension within an atmosphere. Twilight blinked several times over, wondering why they were doing something like this, noticing now the clipboard had various times and criteria. You know how some things say, don't try this at home. Please leave it to the professionals. The clipboard holding stallion stated. We're professionals, the other stallion stated, then, giving each other a hoof bump, walked off. 75.9, Jim Quirk. Having a high-powered arcane practitioner along made for a refreshing change to an otherwise baseline run, concluded Luke Skywalker. He, Chewbacca, and Scootaloo were tidying up the detention reception area while Twilight had gone to spring Leia from her cell. Seeing the equestrian anchor in action was enough to make him consider dusting off some of the magical skills he'd picked up from other fusion loops and then allowed to atrophy. Wrong context magic, Spike had called it when they'd discussed their force abilities and alternate methods of achieving similar effects. Twilight's magic had proved to be quite versatile and did not leave much of a disturbance in the force for others to detect. It would be worth deeper consideration when he had time. It was almost scary how cleanly their intrusion into the detention block had gone. Start with the usual banter with the guard detail, Chewbacca suddenly breaking free of his restraints. And then Twilight emerged from behind the Wookiee and paralyzed all the Imperials with a word and a gesture with her staff. Luke could have performed a similar feat via force stasis, but that would have set off a clearly detectable ripple for Vader to pick up. There was no inconvenient dead Imperial slumped on top of the alarm button this time. Dealing with the remote monitor cameras and automated defense turrets was something of an afterthought. To prove that he had some crossover loop cred of his own, Chewbacca had rendered one of the stormtrooper guards unconscious with a Vulcan neck pinch. Through his armor. All had agreed that it was suitably impressive. Returned to the reception area after depositing the Imperials in an unused cell, Luke and Chewbacca heard the tail end of a conversation. Not the first time I've seen a late awakening alter someone's appearance, Twilight was saying. Yet. Remind me to tell you about the time a bunch of us were on the Enterprise and Silver Spoon came in late, added Scootaloo. Luke blinked. Leia had changed. Gone were the brown hair and eyes. The familiar twin bun hairdo was rendered almost unrecognizable by the violet, rose, and pale gold colors that were swirled into the pattern. Her eyes were now a light purple that almost matched Twilight's skin. She was also several centimeters taller. Ah! Introductions, blurted Twilight spotting the loop natives. Chewie, Luke, may I present Her Highness, Princess Mi-Amor Cadenza, CO ruler of the Crystal Empire and my sister-in-law? Cadence, may I present Chewbacca, first mate of the Millennium Falcon, and Luke Skywalker, potential Grand Master of the New Jedi Order? I believe you already know Captain Solo. Scootaloo snorted amusement as the three made polite bows toward one another. A beep from her comlink interrupted the ceremonies. What's up, sweetie? asked the pilot. Apple Bloom says she'll be finished up here in about 5 minutes and will be relocating. You can trigger the alarm anytime after that, reported the protocol droid. Oh, Faerun. All 3 of them? Cadence asked Twilight in an undertone. Yep. Spike too. He's off taking care of the tractor beam, answered the Twi'lek. Look. I've got my own errand to run. I'll meet you all back at the ship. I've got teleport coordinates for the main compartment if things get hairy, she said as she entered a turbo lift. Wait. You're deliberately setting off the alarm here? Asked Cadence as the doors closed. We need to give Tarkin and Vader a reason to put a homing device on the Falcon, explained Luke. Cadence paused to consider this. Okay, I think I follow the reasoning. And then we get to play hide and seek with the patrols for the next 20 to 30 minutes. Pretty much. Just to be clear, this is the part where all pretense of sticking to the baseline go down the proverbial garbage chute. Well, we'd like to get off the Death Star first, but yet. Okay. She shuffled in the sleeves of her robe and produced a Minberry collapsible fighting pike and a metal ring about 30 centimeters in diameter. Where'd you get that? Asked Scootaloo, indicating the pike. Diamond Tyra's not the only one who's done B5 loops. I've also got a phaser rifle and a Hogwarts wand for backup. Twilight emerged from the turbolift onto the unpopulated cargo level. She looked at the square kilometers of deck space stacked with crates, cases, and containers and suppressed a sigh. Finding the cargo consignments Bloom had indicated would be more of a chore than it first seemed, even with the map downloaded to her datapad. At least I should be able to handle the transmutation magic without going alicorn, she thought, shifting her grip on her staff. Sweetie and Apple Bloom were casually making their way to the recharge and monitor station near the Millennium Falcon's hangar when they were confronted by a harried-looking junior officer. You. Astromech. Are you familiar with the YT-1300? Bloom twittered an affirmative. Sweetie translated, my counterpart has basic knowledge of all Corellian Engineering Corporation vessels. Great. Come with me. I need to get a homing beacon. They dutifully followed the officer to a hatch that accessed the armory for this group of hangar bays. The officer entered an access code carefully observed by Sweetie to open the door and fell to the stun beam from the phaser Apple Bloom had quietly deployed from one of her dome compartments. Quick! Drag him inside, she beeped. The protocol droid awkwardly tried to comply. After a few futile seconds, Bloom deployed her tow cable and had Sweetie rig a makeshift harness. I've told you. This body just isn't built for physical activity, she fretted. Never mind that. Can ya handle collectin' the beacon? And can I have a word with Clover? Performing the best approximation of a shrug her body could manage, Sweetie pulled out the device containing Starswirl's student and put it on a convenient case of laser focusing lenses. She then went in search of the requested homing device. You feelin' up to doin' a little magic, Clover? Asked Apple Bloom. The device reconfigured itself into the form of an armored unicorn. That would depend on what sort of spells you had in mind. Just some minor healin' and suggestion, and a few not-so-minor transmutations, started Apple Bloom. With a whisper of force suggestion, Spike silently ghosted past the 2 guards and out of the compartment where the third-stage tractor beam power regulator override was located. Just what does the Empire have against safety rails? He asked himself idly. Taking a moment to glance at his chrono, he started to consider how he would spend the next 20 minutes before returning to the Falcon's hangar bay. He could sense Vader's presence in that area, and he didn't want to force that encounter until his friends were in position to take advantage of the distraction the show would provide. And, he admitted to himself, it would be nice to have Luke, Twilight, and the others available if things turned ugly. Spotting an empty break room, he decided to see if there was anything interesting in the refrigeration unit. 75.10. Behold, I am Smaug the Red, the huge red dragon roared. My voice is the clap of a thunderstorm, and he paused. I do not recall Bilbo Baggins being female. The hobbit below him smiled uncertainly. Hello, Mr. Smaug. Smaug crashed back down onto all fours, sending coins flying. Is that Fluttershy I hear? Well, yes, actually. She waved. Though I'm Flutter Flaggins here. How are you? Fine, fine. He gestured around with his head and one foreleg at the cavernous building. I've gone into politics, as you can see. I can. Fluttershy smiled. Mr. Gandalf was quite confused. He didn't expect you to be mayor of Lake Town. The election was interesting, Smaug allowed, unconsciously stroking the scarf wound around his neck. I donated about half the hoard to Lake Town. This is the Treasury building and got elected in a landslide. Have you met Sir Bard? He's the deputy mayor. I have, yes. Fluttershy looked back at the door. He seems quite a grumpy guts. So, I hope you're doing better these days. Indeed I am. The red dragon lay back down. I was dubious at first as to whether I could truly find enjoyment in something other than violence or treasure, but your friends back in Equestria convinced me otherwise, and it certainly appears to have worked. I'm glad to hear it. The hobbit rummaged in her pockets. Now, what have I got in my pocket? The one ring, I assume, Smaug replied, rolling his eyes. Should I destroy it right now? It would presumably save a great deal of trouble. Oh, that's in here as well. But there's something else everyone in Equestria decided you should have. Fluttershy finally found what she was looking for in her pocket, and withdrew a shining blue crystal about the size of two fists clasped together. Is that the crystal heart? Smaug asked, squinting down at it. Yes, it is. Twilight went and got the one from your loop in Equestria just before the loop ended. We take turns carrying it, just in case one of us runs into you. She looked down at it, then back up at him. Twilight told me that you didn't want a reward, and that's really very good. It shows that you've managed to get control of your own instincts. But consider this a well-done present. Smaug the Unconquerable smiled. Well, how can I refuse? Thank you, Fluttershy. Really, it's no problem at all, Flutter Flaggins reaffirmed, putting the crystal down. Remember to take it with you by the end of the loop. I will, Smaug assured her, touching the scarf again. Fluttershy caught sight of it and smiled, but let it go. Then she gasped. Oh, I nearly forgot the other thing I came in for. Where's the Arkenstone, please? Oh, that thing. Smaug shrugged his massive wings. I left it in the Lonely Mountain with the other half of my gold. They're welcome to it. Lovely. Fluttershy reached into her pocket, and flipped the one ring into the air. A spear of roaring dragon fire, 2 inches wide and too bright to look at, caught it at the apex of the throw. Something shook the earth. A puddle of molten metal landed on the flagstones with a bubbly hiss. Pleasure doing business with you, Miss Fluttershy, Smaug rumbled amicably. Nice to see you as well, Smaug.